days, but wasn't as vigorous as I expected it. Opening round, premier round, in statements by members. L'honorable député.
The honourable member.
Monsieur Reyes is not there.
Okay, Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, I invite everyone to join us in Kitchener-Conestoga this weekend as we welcome patrons back to the 59th annual Elmira Maple Syrup Festival on Saturday, April 1st. Since its start in 1965, the festival has grown to be the largest single-day maple syrup festival in the world. The community of Elmira, with a population of 12,000 people, will welcome up to 80,000 guests. Individuals and families can take part in the pancake flipping contest, family fun arena, live music, toy and craft show, and of course, enjoy pancakes drenched in maple syrup. So thank you to the committee for your dedication and perseverance. Thanks to the sponsors for your financial support. And thanks to the volunteers who work tirelessly to make this festival happen. All proceeds from the festival are returned to our community's charitable and not-for-profit organizations. From morning breakfast to savoring the food, appreciating the vendors, enjoying artists, I know my family and I will have a great day. You will too. Everyone's welcome to join us at the Elmira Maple Syrup Festival. See you there. Thank you.
Yay. The honourable member for Oshawa.
Last weekend, I, along with our leader, the member from Carleton, had a wonderful time celebrating Ugadi, Telugu New Year's Day, with both the Durham Telugu Association and the Ontario Telugu Foundation. This festival is celebrated across the world on the first day of the Hindu lunar calendar and includes a reading of predictions of the upcoming year by a priest or eldest member of the family. It's a time to celebrate with family and friends and to reflect on the past year's achievements and challenges. We felt so privileged to be included in the celebrations with this vibrant community that values tradition, family, and culture. Their warm hospitality, rich traditions, and colorful celebrations are so beautiful and fascinating. I'd like to thank Serini, Morali, and so many others from the Durham Association and the Ontario Foundation for the opportunity to experience it firsthand. Ugadi Shubhakankshalu, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Here, here, wait. The honourable member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, the Mackenzie River Basin drains nearly 20% of Canada's landmass. Waters in Alberta, BC flow north towards Great Slave Lake, down the Mackenzie River and into the Arctic Ocean. The illegal, unreported Coral tailings leak is just the most recent risk to one of the largest freshwater sources in the world. It is yet another industrial project south of the 60 that threatens the basin. Even before this leak, NBTers have long had concerns about the impacts of these projects on our waters. Creeks and small rivers are drying out. Ice is more treacherous. Ponds and small lakes have disappeared. Water is less deep and warmer. Mammals and fish are disappearing. Regulating this specific cleanup and developing a monitoring plan with all those impacted is necessary and important. Northern Indigenous peoples and the government of Northwest Territories are impacted and are necessary part of the discussions. Mr. Speaker, the Mackenzie River Basin must not be used as another tailings pond.
Here, here.
The honourable member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, on Monday in Louisville, Sergeant Maureen Bro was serving her community. She was dedicated and she was serving overtime. She was experienced, thoughtful, appreciated by all. She had just been promoted and had ahead of her a great future and many plans. Monday evening, Maureen Bro did not go home. She died when she was trying to reestablish security in the community. The circumstances of these events indicate that we have a duty as a society to understand what happened to prevent such tragedies in the future. All of Berthier-Masquinongé, all of Quebec are in mourning. To the family and friends, to the spouse and children of Ms. Bro, we are with you. To her colleagues in the Sûreté du Québec, our thoughts are with you. My heart goes out to you. We mourn an everyday hero who made the ultimate sacrifice. We will remember. The Honourable Member for Saint-Léonard-Saint-Michel.
Mr. Speaker, today I would like to recognize the hard work and dedication of a group of 17 young female athletes in my riding and members of Les Suprêmes Novices de Saint-Léonard who won gold at the 2023 Novice Canadian Championships 2023 Skate Canada Cup. Les Suprêmes delivered an outstanding performance in the synchronized skating competition held in Calgary. Congratulations to Sienna Ferranta, Lily Rose Wallet, Sophie Belliveau, Chiara Frastasio, Linda Petreccia, Nuri Boni, Dalia Dawn, Noélie Exina, Yifan Mo, Léa Bougamar, Emma Valente, Zoe Deslauriers, Kira Lorovinsky, Ashlyn Alexandre, Alice Sigouin, Maïka René, and team captain Megan Lucarelli. Les Suprêmes, you're an inspiration for us all, a source of pride for both St. Leonard and Canada. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, what do CTV Bureau Chief Bill Fortier, President of Save the Children Canada Danny Glenn Wright, Film Director Adam Smolik, and star of Canada's Ultimate Challenge Alana Warnick, and me all have in common? Well, we all graduated from Winnipeg's Glenlawn Collegiate Institute 25 years ago, and this May the school will celebrate its 100th anniversary. This Western Canadian public school has quietly had an enormous impact on Canadian culture. Countless leaders, including Nobel Prize-winning astrophysicist Jim Peebles, graduated from Glenlawn. Glenlawn's teachers deserve our thanks, including Teresa Oswald for teaching us to speak truth to power, Arpina Babian and Irene Nordheim for teaching the power and value of volunteerism, and a person who has had a long-standing impact on my life, band teacher Bill Christensen, for teaching that beauty is always found as harmony is wrested from cacophony, a lesson this place could learn once in a while. So to the Glenlawn family, on our 100th year anniversary of this remarkable institution, let out a collective roar of Lion's Pride. Happy anniversary, Glenlawn.
L'honorable député de Lac-Saint.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Louis.
Lakeshore Soccer Club will be named one of Canada Soccer's organizations of distinction. Founded in 1966, the club is a pillar of the Montreal West Islands sports and recreational life and is home to around 4,000 players each year. In addition to its dynamic house leagues, Lakeshore Soccer fields regional and provincial teams at the A, AA, AAA, and semi-pro levels and has brought home multiple women's and men's national youth titles.
Its women's team is a 3-time Quebec Cup champion. The club also offers the Supersonics program, which allows children with special needs to play the sport in an inclusive and welcoming environment. In 2017, the program received an A Part Entière award from the Quebec government.
Club alumni include Ryan Wilkinson, who won Olympic bronze in 2012 and 2016, and James Pantemis, currently goalkeeper with CF Montreal. Congratulations to Lakeshore Soccer on being chosen for this honor, and thank you to the thousands of volunteers who have contributed to the club's longevity and unparalleled success.
The Honourable Member for Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, it is with a heavy heart that I rise to pay tribute and say a few words in celebration of the life of Mr. Allison Herbert Whitehead, Al as he was known to everyone. For decades, Al has been a prominent contributor to our community in Fredericton. He was a dear friend of one of my wonderful predecessors, Andy Scott. Anyone who knew Al knew that he played hard and worked harder. He built a successful law practice over 47 years on Fredericton's north side, the strong side. He was known for being dedicated to his clients, kind, generous, but he was above all a family man. Al and his wife Marlene built a family of 3 daughters, Jennifer, Kate, and Brittany. Al's heart was at its fullest when he had his family together, often at the family camp in Juniper, New Brunswick, telling stories to his granddaughters Ella and Allison or teaching them how to fish and hunt. Al and I shared a connection through our love of hockey. He was also a loyal Yankees fan, and one of his favorite hobbies was teasing Red Sox fans when the Yankees beat them. A lover of life and people, a fighter. He will remain with us forever through our memories and everlasting life lessons. My sincere condolences to his family and many, many friends. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, spring coincides with the beginning of the start of hockey playoffs across the country. Starting Friday, the Victoriaville Tigers will face their longtime rivals, the Drummondville Voltigeurs, in the first round of the playoffs. Having witnessed the hard work and determination of the Victoriaville players, who are led by very competent and passionate coaches and supported by loyal, vocal, and knowledgeable fans, today I would like to confidently challenge my colleague from Drummond so that the loser of the playoffs will share a video on our respective social networks praising the quality of the poutine made in the winner's city. I'm confident that he will take on the challenge. He will proudly wear the jersey from the Victoriaville Tigers in his video, and that we will win, and this will be very exciting. Go, Tigers, go.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
So yesterday, an executive from McKinsey finally showed up at the Operations Committee. Opposition members were excited about the opportunity to finally ask tough questions to the company that fueled the opioid crisis, helped Saudi authorities identify dissidents, and received over $100 million in contracts from this Liberal government. Now, Liberal members were excited about the opportunity to pitch their resumes and consider career options for after the next election. Now, Liberals have long claimed that all the rules were followed in their contracts with McKinsey, but on Friday they admitted otherwise. A government press release contradicted the government House leader, saying that rules were in fact not consistently followed for the awarding of these contracts. So no surprises here. Again, Liberals ignored the rules in order to reward their well-connected and ethically deficient friends. It's time to privatize McKinsey. Canadians have had enough of the Liberal NDP McKinsey coalition. They want austerity for McKinsey and opportunity for Canadians. They want a government that will finally put the people ahead of the high-priced consultants.
The honourable member for Scarborough-Guildwood.
Mr. Speaker, the continuing imprisonment of the courageous Vladimir Karamurza is a gross violation of his and the human rights of all Russians. He spoke the truth to Putin power, and now all Russians live in a fog of truth and lies. Vladimir Karamurza had the temerity to tell his fellow citizens the truth of the Ukrainian invasion, that it was illegal, a gross violation of human rights, and a waste of human life. For his courage, he languishes in a Putin jail, having lost 50 pounds and having been poisoned twice by Putin's thugs. His health is precarious. In photos, he looks emaciated. If he's not released immediately, there's a real chance he will die in jail. A triumph for Putin and a tragedy for Russia. We must not let this happen. Please add your voice to the freeing of Vladimir Karamurza. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, it's with great sadness that we learned last week that Edmonton has lost another of its finest. Constable Corinne Klein passed away after a brief illness. She knew she wanted to be a police officer from the moment she started volunteering with the Edmonton Police Service. She served with the EPS for 21 years, working in multiple roles including patrol, assisting domestic violence survivors and victims, and in the Community Engagement Unit. I was fortunate to work with Constable Klein in teaching anti-fraud seminars to seniors. She was so engaging, she was literally the only person I've ever met who could make PowerPoint presentations seem interesting. Despite the stresses that all officers must face and endure, she was always the embodiment of positivity and kindness. She truly had a servant's heart. And our community, the community that she loved and served so much, will miss her dearly.
The honourable member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
Profound loss never leaves us. I cannot imagine the lifelong horror, grief, and questions never answered when a loved one is murdered. A few hours ago, the report of the Nova Scotia Mass Casualty Commission was released into the murder of 22 of my fellow Nova Scotians and an unborn child. The Commission's work had minimal input from the families who were not allowed to question witnesses. They deserved better. Lisa McCauley, Constable Heidi Stevenson, Sean McLeod, Alana Jenkins, Jolene Oliver, Emily and Aaron Tuck, Jamie Blair, Greg Blair, Corey Ellison, Gina Goulet, Tom Bagley, Elizabeth Thomas, John Zale, Joey Weber, Lillian Campbell Hislop, Don and Frank Gulichin, Heather O'Brien, Joy and Peter Bond, Kristen Beaton and her unborn child all deserved better, as do their families. They lived in the member of Cumberland Colchester's community, where he is today with the families. The past 3 years have been a nightmare for them. Today, let's remember their vibrant lives and pray for them.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, after dozens of games, countless practices, and more than one trip home because we forgot something, the end of another incredible hockey season for our kids in Vaudreuil-Soulanges is upon us. As the Hawks, Riverains, Predators, Vikings, and my son Andy's team, the Titans, hang up their skates for the last time this season, I want to pay tribute to those who made it all possible. The incredible parent volunteers who stepped up to coach, manage, staff the arena, and even referee and drive.
Speaker got better because of them. They learned teamwork because of them, made new friends because of them, and their dream of one day playing in an NHL jersey got just a little bit closer because of them. Au nom de tous les...
On behalf of all the parents and children who have benefited from your time and energy, I offer you one last cup of coffee at 6 a.m. and simply say thank you.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, there are at least 500,000 kids spread out across this country trying to deal with a disorder that makes it hard for them to succeed in school and in life. Without support, many of them won't graduate and will face a lifetime of problems: addiction, troubles with school, challenges with their lives. ADHD is the most common childhood psychiatric disorder, and Canada is not doing enough to help these kids and their families. Today, with the help of my son, McLean, I tabled Bill C-329, an act to establish a national framework respecting attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, because I know we can do better. I know how important this is, Mr. Speaker. As an MP, I've heard from countless parents and teachers about the challenges they face. As a teacher, I understand the frustration of not knowing how to help. And as a mother of a teenager with ADHD, I know how difficult it can be for these kids and for these families. It doesn't have to be this way, Mr. Speaker. Canada can do better. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, I salute the audacity of the member for Richmond-Arthabaska because it takes a lot of courage to challenge the Drummondville Voltigeurs fans and to put our regional pride at stake, poutine. It is therefore with confidence that I accept his challenge with the conviction that our Voltigeurs will give everything they have to save the honour of the region, because our Reds, Mr. Speaker, it's not like in this chamber, our Reds in Drummond, they are proud and they know how to make us proud. My colleague may think he's safe with his Tigers in third place and my Voltigeurs in 13th in the regular season, but I can't wait for the moment when his Victoriaville Kitties are officially declawed and he comes to taste our local specialty right where it was invented, the poutine at Roi Giuseppe in Drummondville. The 122 rivalry is back on, Mr. Speaker, and it starts this Friday. I therefore accept the challenge launched by my neighbour, the member for Richmond-Arthabaska, and may the best team win. Go Voltigeurs, go!
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
What's in a name? Well, let's ask provincial Liberal parties. You would think that having the same party name as the federal governing party would be an advantage, but clearly it's not. Provincial Liberals, suffering from the brand damage that this Prime Minister is doing, are barge pulling away from the PM's party name. The Saskatchewan Liberal Party had a long history in my province. In fact, 6 out of 7 of our first premiers were Liberal. But the PM has destroyed the party's name so badly, the Sask Liberals just voted to end their embarrassment and stop calling themselves Liberal altogether. They don't even have a name for the new party. They would rather be called the No Name Party than have any association with this Prime Minister. Liberals in BC made recently the same decision, realizing that to win elections, they can't have any association with this disastrous PM either. And I'm told the Alberta Liberal Provincial Caucus was considering doing the same thing until they realized they didn't exist. No surprise. After decimating Canada's energy sector, dividing Canadians and 40-year highs in inflation, it's no wonder nobody wants to be associated with him.
The Honourable Member for Sudbury.
Mining is one of Sudbury's economic cornerstones. With our government's commitment of $3.7 billion and the launch of the Critical Minerals Strategy earlier this year, the Conference Board of Canada has predicted Sudbury's economy is primed to outperform Ontario and Canada in the coming year. Our government's plan is working. The number of jobs related to critical minerals rose by nearly 20% in the last 2 years alone, reaching a 14-year high. With 9 operating mines, 2 mills, 2 smelters, and a nickel refinery, Sudbury is home to over 300 mining and mining supply firms who generate approximately $4 billion in annual exports. With the world's demand for critical minerals, Sudbury is poised to play a major role in the continuation of job creation, economic opportunity, and continued prosperity. Mr. Speaker, I want to highlight Sudbury's potential and how we can continue to play a role in ensuring Canada will become the world's green supplier of choice for critical minerals.
Right on. Oral questions. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Today, the government acted in an unprecedented way. It is censoring debate on a bill that itself would censor what Canadians can say and watch online. That will give these woke people in Ottawa the power to control Quebecers. And incredibly, the Bloc Québécois is in favor of this additional Ottawa censorship. Only the Conservative Party is against it. When will this government stop attacking freedom of expression? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, there is a consensus in Quebec about the fact that we should make web giants pay their fair share. Authors, musicians, producers, screenwriters, directors, artists, technicians, everyone agrees, everyone, except for these Conservatives. They all agree about Bill C-11. Mr. Speaker, I would invite the Conservatives to get on the right side of things and support Quebec and Canadian culture. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Is no culture without freedom of expression. Just to point out the disinformation from that member. He says all artists support this. Well, even Margaret Atwood, no Conservative, has said that this bill represents creeping totalitarianism. Creeping totalitarianism. It gives the power to a woke agency, the CRTC, named by Liberals, to manipulate social media algorithms in order to shut down voices it does not want people to hear. When will this government realize that Orwell's 1984 was not an instruction manual?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, these are the same old talking points from the Conservative Party, and it happens to be the same talking points of big tech. Mr. Speaker, why don't they finally stand up to the big guys and big tech in this country and try to do what we're doing and making sure that big tech is going to be paying their fair share to Canadian artists, Canadian producers, you know, to our local media. But instead of standing up for Canadians, these folks are standing up for the Googles, etc. Mr. Speaker, I ask them to come onto the right side and please support Canadians and people who produce these content.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And therein lies the problem. The government will get to decide what is the right side of the debate and shut down everyone they consider to be on the wrong side. Let's be clear. This bill doesn't hurt big tech. They'll still monopolize all of social media. Their platforms will still dominate. It's just that government bureaucrats will be able to manipulate the algorithms to shut down the voices of individual Canadians. Top experts on freedom of expression online say that, and so does Margaret Atwood, who calls this creeping totalitarianism. If the Prime Minister is not afraid of debate, why is he so determined to shut it down?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The reality is that right now the tech giants are not paying their fair share. And 71% of Canadians agree that they should be doing so. And this is the reason why, that's why we are making sure that we have C11 to deal with this job. We know that the web giants must do more. Mr. Speaker, more for our culture, more for our local media, more to protect our children. That's exactly what we're doing. Why are they against that?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Favor of freedom of speech, Mr. Speaker. It's very simple. Big tech has no problem with this bill. They'll keep making money hand over fist because of their oligopoly. The government doesn't want to break up that oligopoly. They've been sucking up to big tech for the last 8 years. What they want to do is shut down debate. Mr. Speaker, Canadians want the freedom to express themselves without government control.
Ask the Honourable Member to put his prop down, please. I think he's been around long enough to know what a prop is. I don't have to explain it. The Honourable Member has 7 seconds left.
It is a book, and it's still legal, Mr. Speaker, at least for now. When will the government stop its attack on freedom of speech and freedom of expression?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, like the member opposite, the Leader of the Opposition, I have dedicated my life to ensuring that free speech occurs in this country. The holding up a book and pretending that this is about anything other than making sure that big tech pays their fair share, that they pay their fair share to our artists and creators in this country, trying to pretend that there's anybody in this House who believes anything other than free speech. It's the very reason that member could go all over the country and say all kinds of nonsense that I disagree with, because we have free speech in this country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We do for now, Mr. Speaker, and I want to assure him that as long as we have free speech, I'll keep beating that party in debate after debate after debate. Let's turn to another falsehood this government spread. They claim that their carbon tax would make everybody better off, but now their own parliamentary budget officer revealed that Nova Scotians and Newfoundlanders, just like people right across the country, will pay about $1,500 more in carbon taxes than they get back in rebates, directly contradicting this government. Why have they misled the people of Atlantic Canada with this sneaky tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, good news is coming to Atlantic Canada on July 1st. The climate rebate will be coming to Atlantic Canada. That will mean up to $1,000 for a family of 4 in Nova Scotia, in Prince Edward Island, in New Brunswick, Mr. Speaker, $1,300 in Newfoundland and Labrador. 8 out of 10 families will be better off, Mr. Speaker. And if he doesn't believe me, Mr. Speaker, perhaps he'll believe Conservative Premier Blaine Higgs. We need to make a choice that is in the best interest of New Brunswickers. What this does is now to provide relief from inflation. I agree with the Premier of New Brunswick.
L'honorable député de la Prairie.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about Chinese interference. In the budget, the government came up with a new gimmick, the National Counter Foreign Interference Office, which means that the Prime Minister is actually showing himself that all the committees and the so-called robust measures that he's been talking about for weeks, that all these measures don't work and that he knows it. And this shows that the government got taken to the cleaners by China during the last 2 elections, and he knows it. Isn't this the proof that we need an independent public inquiry? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
We will never tolerate any form of foreign interference in our democracy and internal affairs. That's why through Budget 2023, we're providing $48.9 million to the RCMP to protect Canadians from harassment and intimidation and engage with communities at greater risk of being targeted, and establishing a National Counter Foreign Interference Office. In our robust Indo-Pacific strategy, we provided more capabilities to our security agencies to deal with any form of foreign interference by and any country. We will always defend our democracy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the so-called independence of the Special Rapporteur. The Prime Minister doesn't need him to take action, and the proof of that is he didn't wait for his recommendations to create this national office. In fact, he's actually given the Rapporteur his very conclusions before he has a chance by putting it in the budget. And all of this, the Special Rapporteur and the new National Office, are programs invented by the Prime Minister under his control. Because the Prime Minister wants to control the information we're getting. That's the reality, but Quebecers can see through it. They want an independent public inquiry. The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, public safety is a matter where we must absolutely ensure that we use the facts in debate. The independence of Mr. Johnston is clear. He's the former Governor General. He was someone who was actually appointed by Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And he has had a remarkable career of service to Canada, and we will see that once again here as well.
Le député de New Westminster, Burnaby.
Today's report from the Mass Casualty Commission identified myriad failures. Our thoughts are with the victims and their families. Nova Scotians paid for the many failures in policing. For years, we've had recommendations to fix these problems that have been ignored by this government. This report also clearly identifies the link between gender-based violence and this horrific mass killing. Tonight, hundreds of women and children will be looking for shelter from violence, and they won't have anywhere to go. Will this government provide urgent funding to ensure all those fleeing violence have a safe place to stay tonight?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is a difficult day for the families, for the communities in Nova Scotia. All MPs in this House are thinking about them and holding them in their hearts. This morning was the release of the Mass Casualty Commission's report. We will be considering the recommendations in the report, carefully reviewing them, working with the provinces, territories, and civil organizations, including those that deal with gender-based violence, in order to respond to the recommendations in due course.
L'honorable député de Rose.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, if the NDP hadn't pushed this government, there wouldn't be funding in the budget to create good union jobs to fight climate change. But we know that we need to do much more. For years, the Liberals have been missing their objectives and have been giving billions of dollars to oil companies. That's making things worse. Joe Biden is investing in a green industrial policy. Will this Liberal government finally show leadership by investing in infrastructure, renewable energy, and good jobs for today and tomorrow? The Honourable Minister.
The question from the Honourable Member, and in fact all the infrastructure that he is discussing and he's talking about will be built by union jobs, or it will be built by workers who are paid prevailing union wages. That is a game changer in this country, Mr. Speaker. That is something that union leadership, right from the Canadian Labour Congress to Unifor to the Alberta Federation of Labour to Trades NL, have all been asking for. They have all asked for a seat at the table. We have told them for years they will lead that table, and this budget proves it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The government says to the people, believe not your eyes. Because when you look at page 3 of the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report today on their carbon tax, it says that the net cost for a Nova Scotia family when this carbon tax is implemented is $1,513. $1,513 more in carbon tax costs than in rebates. For Newfoundlanders, the number is $1,300 in net costs. Why, if this government is so proud of driving up the cost of gas, heat, and groceries on Atlantic Canadians and consumers everywhere, why have they worked so hard to mislead about the real cost?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives never talk about the costs of climate change, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer has talked about those costs, predicted to be $25 billion, Mr. Speaker, by 2025, a $9 billion impact to the BC economy from floods, from fires, from drought. The town of Linton burned to the ground, Mr. Speaker. 600 people lost their lives in the heat dome, Mr. Speaker. When are the Conservatives going to stop the denial and get serious about climate change? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Notice he's not even contesting the facts now. The government is now admitting, After falsely stating for half a decade that Canadians will be better off with a carbon tax, they're admitting what their parliamentary budget officer reported, that on average, Newfoundlanders and Nova Scotians will pay approximately $1,500 in net additional costs above and beyond any phony rebate they get back. And worst of all, it hasn't even worked. They've missed every single emissions target. Why won't they ditch this tax plan and come up with a real climate plan?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And something is not sinking in, Mr. Speaker. The climate rebate will put more money in people's pockets. He should look at page 5 of the original PBO report. 8 out of 10 families will be better off, Mr. Speaker. But you know, Mr. Speaker, what won't make families better off? Investing in cryptocurrency. Mr. Speaker, that is reckless economic advice by the leader of the opposition. I see him in the House here. Will he stand in his place? Will he apologize to Canadians for his reckless environmental advice?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So for the Emergencies Act Commission, they named a Liberal staffer as the independent commissioner. For the Foreign Interference Rapporteur, they named the Prime Minister's ski buddy and member of the Trudeau Foundation. And now they needed someone to be the Ethics Commissioner, so they named a Liberal minister's sister-in-law to that position of independent ethics commissioner, the same minister who's already been found guilty of violating the law. Mr. Speaker, when is this Liberal government going to run out of family and friends to name as independent officers?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the ski buddy that the honourable member refers to is David Johnston, an eminent Canadian who actually Stephen Harper chose to be Governor General of this country, and who he stood in his place and commended as being a good choice and one that was appropriate as Governor General. To suggest that David Johnston doesn't have in his heart the best interests of Canada as he looks at the issue of foreign interference is ridiculous. With respect to the position that he has just referred to on the interim ethics commissioner, again, this was somebody who's been in that office for 10 years, who came in when Stephen Harper was in office, and is second in command in that office.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
You can almost imagine the conversation between the Liberal Intergovernmental Affairs Minister, who was found guilty of breaking the ethics law, and the Prime Minister, who's twice been found guilty of breaking the ethics law, saying, how are we going to quit getting found guilty? I know, we'll appoint my sister-in-law as the ethics commissioner. What a plan. It is foolproof, Mr. Speaker. My question, though, is, when are they, the problem is, pretty soon they're going to run out of family and friends, and after they do, how are they going to avoid their next conviction for breaking the law?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
There's a place where comedy routines can be tried out. I would suggest that it's not on the floor of the House of Commons. What I will say about the conversations that have taken place in the Ethics Commissioner's office is that for 10 years, the individual in question, who was appointed at the time of Stephen Harper's time in office, that Ethics Commissioner, of which she is number 2 in charge, has absolutely made hard decisions on this government, and by the way, other parties, and has comported themselves with total professionalism. What isn't professional is to take somebody who's worked in the public service for 10 years, making hard decisions, including hard decisions that affected this government, and treat them in that way, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
The Liberal Prime Minister and his gang of serial lawbreakers were told by the outgoing Ethics Commissioner to take remedial ethics training. But instead of that, at Sunday brunch, this Liberal Cabinet Minister turned to his sister-in-law and said, how about we make you the new Ethics Commissioner instead? When are these Liberals going to take their responsibilities seriously and appoint someone who's independent and can restore accountability to this place for all Canadians?
Hey, bravo! The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Ethics Commissioner's role is extremely important in our democracy. Over the last 10 years in which the person they're referring to has been in the office, and they were appointed at the time of Stephen Harper, in the number 2 position, they've taken a lot of difficult positions against this government and, frankly, against that party, which have been well received in the sense that, Mr. Speaker, the Ethics Commissioner's job is to hold us to the highest possible standard. The idea that a public servant can't when they have a screen in place, do their job or set aside differences is not realistic, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Mégantic-l'Érable.
The honourable member from Mégantic-l'Érable. Well, Mr. Speaker, even the Simpson writers could not have reached this level of satire. This Prime Minister was found guilty twice for ethics violations, but he named the sister-in-law of his Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs to a high position, even though that minister himself was found guilty of ethics violations. So, well, ultimately, will that person be asked if it was okay for the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs to be related to the Prime Minister who was also found guilty? It's like The Simpsons. The Honourable Parliament Leader of the Government. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to this matter, this question is clearly capable of acting independently, since they were in the office when decisions were made about the Prime Minister's behavior. The person was appointed during Prime Minister Harper's tenure and was there for 10 years. The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, we don't want to go into a recession, and we'd better not go into a recession, in fact, because in the budget, the Liberals once again seem to forget about their promise to reform EI. Despite current economic uncertainty, they're telling 60% of workers that if something bad happens, too bad, they won't get EI. All economists are worried about the year to come. So how can the Liberals be giving up on the only safety net that exists for workers if they lose their job?
Mr. Speaker, we know Canada's EI system is complex, and that's why we're focused on improving it. In the past 2 years, the Minister led more than 35 virtual, national and regional roundtables with workers, employers and academics. EI reform is a priority, Mr. Speaker. We are on it, and we will get it done. At the same time, we are making historic investments in skills training and in support like childcare to help more Canadians re-enter the workforce, and it's working. Over 830,000 more Canadians are working than before the pandemic. On this side, we will always have workers' backs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals promised to reform EI in 2015, in 2019, in 2021. Then they said at the very latest last summer. Then they said, we cross our hearts, by Christmas we'll do it. They're always kicking it down the road. And here, today, in the budget, the Liberals are completely giving up on this reform. So if even now, when economists are saying there's going to be a recession, the Liberals aren't able to keep their promises to workers, when are workers really supposed to trust them? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her important question. We have always been there for workers throughout Canada. We promised that there would be EI reform, and we will deliver. Mr. Speaker, in this budget, once again, we've shown that we are here for Canadian workers throughout the country, and we will continue to be there. The Honourable Member for Shefford. Mr. Speaker, nothing. Zilch. That's what seniors will find in the budget to help them deal with the cost of living. Nothing. We continue to have two classes of seniors. Pensions will not be increased for people 74 and under. And seniors who want to keep working will be penalized if they want to get the guaranteed income supplement. And others who want to help with a labor shortage have no incentive to do so. In their 300-page budget, couldn't the Liberals have found anything to say for people over 65?
For seniors.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2023 continues to grow our government's plan to support seniors. But, Mr. Speaker, don't take my word for it. HoC, the largest senior-serving organization in Quebec, said, and I quote, welcomes the financial support offered to seniors in the federal budget, notably the one-time grocery rebate and the expansion of the Canadian dental care plan. Mr. Speaker, our new dental care plan will help 9 million Canadians, including seniors, to get the dental care that they need. And our grocery rebate will put hundreds of dollars back in their pocket. Mr. Speaker, I hope the member opposite will vote for this budget so she can continue to support seniors in her riding in Quebec and in all across Canada. Thank you.
Member for Foothills.
Surprise. The Liberal carbon tax isn't revenue neutral, but it actually costs Canadians thousands of dollars a year. But it's only going to get worse when the Liberal NDP Costly Coalition increases the carbon tax on Saturday. We know when they triple the carbon tax, it will cost Canadian farmers $150,000 a year. But every single Canadian will pay the price when they buy bread, pasta, fruit, vegetables, and milk. Higher carbon taxes, higher inflation, higher food prices. How high does the price of bread need to be before the Prime Minister realizes Canadians can't afford it anymore and axes the carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a lot of good news in the budget for farmers, including when it comes to funding for foot and mouth disease vaccines. That's very important, and as well as changes to the advance payment program, which will offer no-interest loans up to $350,000. That's very important. Thank you.
Kent Leamington.
Yesterday, despite the Liberal Party, this House passed Bill C-230-FAR, which exempts farm fuels, grain drying, and barn heating from the carbon tax. But the carbon tax doesn't just apply to the farmer. It applies to the entire food value chain, from the mining and manufacture of fertilizers, to the delivery of farm inputs, to the delivery of farm production, to the packaging of farm inputs, farm production, and groceries every step of the way. The result is now a family of four is going to pay $1,100 more for their groceries in 2023. When does this government, this costly coalition, going to get the facts and stop the tax?
The Honourable Minister, l'Honourable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister, once again, our government is here to support our farmers in various ways. We signed the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, billions of dollars for the sector. When the Conservatives were there, they lowered funding for risk management and R&D programs. We are there to help farmers, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, on April 1st, the carbon tax is going up. And no, that's not an April Fool's joke. That's going to increase costs for our farmers, for our truckers. According to a 2023 report, if the tax is tripled, that will represent $150,000 more in taxes for a 5,000-acre farm. This government has until midnight tomorrow. Will it stop the tax? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I have a great deal of respect for my colleague, but he seems to have skipped some parts of the budget yesterday because there are some key policies in the budget to help Canadians with the cost of living in the budget. For example, the grocery rebate, which will help more than 11 million Canadians throughout the country. And for those who are watching at home, the Conservatives will be voting against that. That's shameful, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Nunavut.
While this federal government had many wins for some Canadians, Indigenous peoples were again neglected in this federal budget. Promises for long-term funding while delaying its rollout is not good enough. For years, urgent and unmet housing needs have been spoken in this House. Yet, Indigenous peoples will continue to live in homelessness, overcrowded and moldy housing, forcing Indigenous peoples to leave their lands. Why does this government continue to put Indigenous peoples at the bottom of their priority list?
Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the member opposite that we can't take our foot off the gas pedal of ensuring that every single Indigenous person in this country can see themselves as having the same access to success as every other Canadian. And that's why our government has made historic investments in infrastructure, over $7 billion committed in Budget 2021. We're going to continue to make those investments with Indigenous communities to ensure kids can get to school in healthy schools, that we can have Indigenous people living in healthy houses, And I'm excited about the $4 billion urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing money in the budget that I welcome the member to work with us on.
The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians need to know their government is using public money responsibly, especially when it comes to their health. But Liberals are refusing to tell taxpayers how much money they lost on a failed $200 million vaccine factory in the health minister's own riding, a scheme that didn't produce a single dose of COVID vaccine. When will the Liberals do the right thing and invest in a public drug manufacturer instead of no-strings-attached giveaways to Big Pharma?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. It's a bit rich for him to criticize this government when, at the time, Mr. Speaker, what we did was the responsible thing. The responsible thing we did at the time, Mr. Speaker, was to invest in the different family of vaccines. Why? To protect the lives of Canadians, Mr. Speaker. And since that moment, we have invested record amount of money in Canada to make sure that we would onshore biomanufacturing. You know why, Mr. Speaker? We didn't choose that pandemic. We're not going to choose if there's another one, but we choose to be better prepared to save the lives of Canadians.
The honourable member for St. John's East.
Seniors representing one of the fastest growing populations in Canada, we require strong public policy measures to ensure they can retire with dignity and respect. Can the Minister of Seniors please update the House on the efforts our government have outlined in the budget to support seniors?
For seniors.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for her excellent question. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2023 continues to grow our government's plan to support seniors, which has already seen poverty rates for seniors drop significantly, Mr. Speaker, since 2015. Through this budget, Mr. Speaker, we're bringing the largest expansion of healthcare in 60 years, providing seniors access to high-quality dental care. We're helping seniors with daily class with the grocery rebate, Mr. Speaker, and we're also helping more seniors access supports such as their guaranteed income supplement through the automatic income tax filing. Mr. Speaker, seniors can be rest assured we'll continue to have their backs. Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
The claims that Canadians get more back in rebates for their failed carbon tax has been proven false by the public budgeting officer. He said the largest net loss will be felt by Albertan families who will pay $2,773 in tax. And in a bid to look more virtuous to eco-radical groups, the HoC coalition is going to jack up their failed carbon tax this Saturday. Why don't they axe the failed carbon tax and stop punishing families for eating, heating, and driving?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every time we put forward an affordability measure, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives vote against it, Mr. Speaker. But good news is coming to the prairies where the member and I live. As of April 1st, a family of 4 will receive a climate rebate up to $1,500 in Alberta and Saskatchewan, $1,000 in Manitoba. Mr. Speaker, this is going to help families. It's going to help families because the checks are going to arrive quarterly. 8 out of 10 families will benefit, Mr. Speaker. I don't know what the Conservatives have against good news.
The honourable member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
More misinformation. Every prairie province is going to pay more in carbon tax than what they get back, and it's proven by the public budgeting officer. And this week, the woke Liberal budget already uppercut every single household with an extra $40 to $100 in cost, all because the Minister of Inflation can't balance a budget.
I think I've warned already about calling each other names. I'm just going to point it out. I'm going to let the honourable member continue, but please treat each other with respect and in a parliamentary manner. The honourable member.
Start from the top. The minister that's responsible for the inflationary problem cannot balance a single budget in this country. And the more the Liberals go woke, the more Canadians go broke. Why don't they cancel their failed carbon tax and give Canadians a break?
The Honourable Minister for Rural Development.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' lack of recognition of climate change and, frankly, lack of awareness of climate change is pretty frightening for me. In the southwest coast of my riding, where the impacts of hurricane are still being affected, the snow is melting. So my communities now are getting ready to rebuild infrastructure, rebuild bridges. And families, there are 105 families getting to rebuild their new homes because they've lost everything. I'm proud to be part of a government that has a plan to address climate change, and our plan is working. I'd like to hear what their plan is, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable député de Louis-Saint.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, small and medium-sized businesses are the backbone of our economy. The women and men who run our SMEs are always in constant contact with Canadians, and they know how to manage a business. The CFIB consulted over 4,300 business leaders, and the results are clear. 61% of business leaders are against the Liberal carbon tax. Will this government, who has disdain for Conservatives, at least listen to business leaders in our country? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, well, it's very interesting that my Conservative colleague raises the CFIB as a subject because the CFIB highlighted how amazing our budget is for small businesses because we have reduced the burden on them. We have an agreement with banks and credit cards in order to reduce transaction fees for credit card use for all small businesses. Mr. Speaker, this will save over $1 billion. This is incredible, and Canadians will benefit from this. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. The government is great for when it comes to increasing debt because of the government's own debts. The CFIB's survey also mentioned a number of things. 4,300 business leaders state that 40% of them will have to reduce investments, 45% will have to cut wages, 56% will have to increase product costs. That is the direct and tangible impact of this budget if this government were to increase the tax next Saturday. Will the government finally act for the good of all Canadians and cancel this tax on the 1st of April? The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for Louis Saint Laurent, for whom I have a lot of respect. But we listened to entrepreneurs and we heard all Canadians, not only entrepreneurs, and everyone told us three things: help us with the cost of living, invest in healthcare, and build an economic future that will give us prosperity and good, clean jobs in the future. What I can confirm, for the edification of my colleague for Louis Saint Laurent, is that Canadian businesses see that we are going towards a green economy, and that is the best way to create jobs today and in the future. The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, there is no shortage of health needs in Quebec, but instead of addressing these health needs in the budget, the Liberals are inventing a new dental programme on top of the one that we already have here in Quebec. That's almost $3 billion that Quebec could use, where it would be more useful or to improve the existing programme. That is the reason for which the National Assembly has just unanimously called for a right of withdrawal with full compensation for Quebec. Will the government commit to respecting the unanimous request of Quebec's elected officials? The Honourable Minister for Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for having asked that question, which allows me once to commend what we, or rather highlight what we heard from Quebec. From coast to coast, people care about dental care and universal health care. 2 to 3 million Quebecers over the next couple of years will be able to benefit from the new dental programme from the Government of Canada. And 3, this will be done in collaboration with every single province, including Quebec. The Honourable Member from Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, there are health needs everywhere in Quebec. The network is in crisis, but the Liberals did not prioritise these needs in their budget. The Liberals prioritised the needs of the Liberals. They did not listen to Quebec's demands. Their main concern is to ensure that they stay in power by respecting their alliance with the NDP. Their priority is not dental insurance, it's a majority insurance. Should partisan interest dictate where government invests? Will they finally commit to respecting the unanimous request? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleague once again for highlighting the needs of Quebecers. that are just as important as the needs of any other Canadian when it comes to physical and mental health and dental health. And that is why those to whom I've spoken in Quebec are over the moon. Because over the next 2 to 3 years, 2 to 3 million Quebecers, families with modest or median incomes, all these people will be able to benefit from Government of Canada programs.
Gas, home heating, and groceries are more expensive than ever before. This is not new news. This costly coalition is punishing families by pushing people further in debt, and the additional financial stress brought on by this budget will wreak havoc and chaos on so many levels. Mr. Speaker, in Ontario, the Parliamentary Budget Officer reported that the carbon tax will cost approximately $1,800 per household. This government has created a new class, the tax-poor class, who are going to work hard all of their lives and have little to show for it. Canadians need solutions, so Mr. Speaker, will the Liberals cancel their plans to increase the carbon tax this Saturday?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, everyone knows that the first thing that we did when we came into government was lower taxes for the middle class. But did you know that our government has also increased the amount that every Canadian can earn before paying even a penny of federal income taxes? We've increased that to $15,000. That's $3,673 more dollars that you can earn tax-free. It's just another way that we're making life affordable for all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for King Vaughan.
Mr. Speaker, seniors are struggling. This Saturday, the Liberals' plan to increase taxes will make things worse. The cost of gas, heating, and groceries is going up. Carmela, a senior, struggles to put food on her table each week and often skips a meal to make ends meet. This costly coalition is increasing the carbon tax, and it will make the problem worse. Carmela wishes this was just an April Fool's joke. Will this Liberal government cancel the planned increase of the carbon tax this Saturday?
The Honourable Minister for Seniors.
Been there delivering for seniors, and the party opposite has opposed every single measure that we have put forward. Right. Mr. Speaker, once again in this budget, we're providing targeted support for Canadians who need it the most, including seniors. With our new grocery rebate, Mr. Speaker, that is going to give seniors additional money to pay for their groceries. With our new dental care plan, Mr. Speaker, that is going to get that dental care for seniors that they care about. Mr. Speaker, we're expanding the free automatic filing system so vulnerable seniors can have access to critical supports like the GIS, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the Conservatives care about Canadians or seniors, they should vote for the budget.
The Honourable Member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister's new spending spree will cost every Canadian household $4,200 more. A family of four will pay $1,100 more for groceries this year alone, and even more if you live in the north. And on top of that bad news, families in Northwest Territories who have already had to choose between paying for their heating bill or buying groceries will now see this Prime Minister increase the cost of home heating oil by 17 cents a litre this Saturday. When will this Prime Minister and this costly coalition cut the carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, my colleagues across the way don't seem to understand or recognize that there are 2.7 million more Canadians who have been lifted out of poverty since this government came into power. That's 830,000 Canadians more are working since the pandemic. That for every family with the new grocery rebate we're proposing, a family of four will receive $467 to meet their daily needs. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we stand up for Canadians. They don't ever stand up. We do.
The Honourable Member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2023 delivers a lot on affordability for Canadians, including access to nutritious food. And one of its key measures is an additional investment in the Local Food Infrastructure Fund, or LFIF. Can the Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food tell us more about this programme and its impact in communities that range from coast to coast to coast? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleague for Pontiac. I'm very pleased to inform all of our colleagues that In the 2023 budget, there is a new $10 million that has been dedicated for the Local Food Infrastructure Fund. Since this was created or implemented since the very first iteration of the LFIF, and it seeks to strengthen our local healthcare ecosystems with community-based not-for-profit organizations. People will be able to improve their infrastructure and services to their communities.
Shore St. Margaret's.
Gas is going up, home heating is going up, and the cost of groceries are going up. And this week, the NDP Liberal Costly Coalition Spendathon projects that Liberals will collect another $69 billion in Canadian taxes because of their ineffective carbon tax. Today's independent report on the carbon tax says Nova Scotians will pay $1,513 more than they receive. The Liberal carbon tax punishes families and paychecks. Will these Liberals show a little compassion and cancel their carbon tax grab?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we are closing tax loopholes on the wealthiest Canadians to make life more affordable for the middle class. 99% of these measures will be affecting people that make over $300,000 a year. 80% of these measures will be affecting Canadians who make over $1 million a year. So let's be clear. When Conservatives talk about lowering taxes to protect powerful paychecks, they're actually talking about cutting taxes for the 1% and cutting services for workers and seniors and youth and everyone else.
The Honourable Member for Coast of Bay Central Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, when the cost of living increases, women's shelters are extremely hard hit. Safe havens for those fleeing domestic violence could face closing their doors. Yesterday, the public budget officer reported that when Liberals triple their carbon tax, it will cost a Newfoundland and Labrador family an additional $1,316 a year. Women's shelters incur expenses 40 times that of an average family. So will this costly coalition show an ounce of compassion to those most vulnerable by cancelling this Saturday's carbon tax increase?
The Honourable Minister for Rural Economic Development.
Parliamentary Secretary and part of this government when the pandemic hit that we stepped up to get cash right away, money right away at the door to every single one of those women's shelters from coast to coast to coast. And Mr. Speaker, when I stood up before and made a comment about the hurricane in my riding, someone on the other side said, oh, here she goes again. Well, you know what? She's going to keep talking about that hurricane because it's hundreds of millions of dollars of damage in small craft harbors, hundreds of millions of dollars of damage done in infrastructure, hundreds of millions of dollars done to people's homes. We are going to keep talking about that because we have a plan to fix it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, today's report by the Parliamentary Budget Officer is clear. The carbon tax is a tax, is a tax, is a tax. It is costing Ontario families $1,800 more per household than they're getting back. It's raising the cost of fuel and food. Canadians are being played for fools by this costly coalition. In 48 hours, the carbon tax is due to go up again. Will the Liberals cancel their plans to increase the carbon tax this Saturday?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, every time we put forward an affordability measure for dental, rental, supporting children, and what do the Conservatives do, Mr. Speaker? They vote against it, Mr. Speaker. And I'll just emphasize for the 29th time, Mr. Speaker, that the climate rebate puts more money in people's pockets. It makes families better off. And you know what won't make families better off, Mr. Speaker? It's investing in cryptocurrency, Mr. Speaker. And the Honourable Leader of the Opposition had a chance to stand in his place and to apologize for his reckless advice. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member of the Opposition has no plan for the economy.
The Honourable Member for Vaughan, Woodbridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Budget 2023, a Made in Canada plan, introduces various affordability measures, such as a first-time homebuyers account, and also demonstrates our government's unwavering commitment to reconciliation by investing in urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing. Could the Honourable Minister of Housing and Diversity and Inclusion tell this House about these initiatives and what they mean for our country? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Churchill, or I'm sorry, the honourable minister for housing.
I want to thank the honourable member for that important question. Through Budget 2023, Mr. Speaker, we're showing real leadership on housing. We're launching the first-time home buyer tax-free savings account of $40,000, and I'm thrilled to share that financial institutions will be able to offer this to Canadians as of April the 1st. We're also issuing new guidelines to protect those with mortgages, as well as investing a historic amount of $4 billion in the urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy. Mr. Speaker, we shall not rest until each and every Canadian has access to a safe and affordable place to call home.
The honourable member for Churchill, Kawetnuk-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, recreation in regions like ours saves lives. Today, I stood with Indigenous and Northern athletes, coaches, and leaders from Northern Manitoba in calling on Canada and FIFA to support soccer in our communities in the lead up to Canada co-hosting the World Cup. This is a historic moment for Canada on the global stage, and this government has a responsibility to ensure that all our young people are part of it. Will the government work with Indigenous and Northern communities to invest in soccer infrastructure and programming for all our youth in the lead up to the World Cup?
Secretary of Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I could not agree with my colleague more. While Canadians are really excited that Toronto and Vancouver will play host to games during the FIFA 2026 Men's World Cup, we've got to do more to ensure that everybody's got access to sport, physical activity, and recreation. Mr. Speaker, that's why I was so glad to get out to Canmore, Alberta a couple weeks ago to visit Spirit North. That's an organization that brings physical activity like cross-country skiing, mountain biking, and skateboarding to Indigenous youth. First Nations kids across the prairies are experiencing that, and I couldn't agree with my colleague more. Sport saves lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2023, aka the Stay in Power Billions Bonanza, threw Toronto under the bus. The city's deputy mayor warns of significant cuts to city services due to the federal government walking away from its election promise and ignoring Toronto's requests for help with COVID shortfalls. The GTA is the engine of the Canadian economy, and it's about to stall. Mr. Speaker, what services would the government like cut during soaring food prices and a recession? Which homeless shelters should close? How many fire trucks, police cars, and ambulances should be parked? Which after-school and daycare programs should be canceled? Which bus routes? The Liberals relied on Toronto votes to cling to power. MPs have forgotten. In the next election, Torontonians will remind them.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as a former councillor myself, I can tell you firsthand that no federal government has invested in municipalities more than this one. I'd like to actually inform the member opposite on transit alone. Our government since 2016 has invested over $8.6 billion in the city of Toronto. So if that member opposite thinks he has a pulse of Torontonians, he should be reminded that we are there for Toronto and we are investing in real infrastructure projects that make a big difference in the lives of Torontonians.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for question period, and we have a number of rappel au règlements coming up. I'll get to them in a second. Before we do that, I wish to draw the attention of the members to the presence in the gallery of the recipients of the 2023 Governor General's Award in commemoration of the Persons Case. Dr. Lynn Gale, Dr. Shimi Kang, Farah Khan, and Judy White. I understand there have been discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, and that there is agreement to observe a moment of silence in honor of the fallen police officer in Louisville, Quebec. Thank you. Merci. Nous avons des rappels au règlement. We have some points of order. The honourable member for Don Valley West. Then we'll go there. We've got a whole slew of them today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise on this point of order, and I think I can safely say that everyone in this House shares at least two things in common. We are all committed